There are just so many things that I wish I had known before grad school. But today I thought I would share my top 5. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about the top 5 things I wish I would have known before going to grad school, then this video is for you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about everything grad life, grad advice, and research. And in today's video, I am talking about the top 5 things I wish I would have known before starting grad school. And the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, yes, always related to funding because I just didn't know a lot about funding. But the first thing would be very specific to summer funding. When you are approaching graduate school, or at least when I was approaching grad school, a lot of the conversation of, is it fully funded? Is it funded? To get it funded seemed like it was going to be a 12-month all-year type of thing. And it wasn't until I got into my first year, kind of in the thick of things, right before summer break, did I realize that actually I didn't have summer funding. And so when you are looking at your funding packages, generally if you have a TA-ship or a graduate student researcher, or if you have a fellowship, you should look at what is the time frame. In most cases, it will cover from the beginning of your school year to the end of the school year. So that's about a 9-month range, leaving your summer months to be pretty vulnerable. And I didn't realize this. In fact, I didn't actually think about it, like I said, until right before the summer hit. Luckily for me, I applied to a summer research program because everybody was doing it in my department, and I ultimately got the award, and it gave me a little bit of money for me to be able to survive throughout the summer. Now, this also happened again to me my second year. Again, working on making sure I'm funded, having rent, having food, having tuition and all of that covered. And then it came, a couple months before summer, and I start to panic and think, oh my goodness, how am I gonna get my summer paid? Do not be like me. Be proactive and make sure you are constantly thinking about how are you going to pay for your expenses during the summer. And that might be getting a summer job, or applying to fellowships and grants for your summer funding, or maybe even moving back into your family's house or with friends to help offset some of those costs. Whatever it has to be to help you survive, definitely do it. But I had no idea that summer funding wasn't always kind of wrapped up into the whole financial package, and it was often something that I forgot about. Now, the second thing that I wish I would have known before going to grad school also relates to funding, and this is funding your fieldwork. Now, luckily for me, in this one, I kind of picked up on the game a little bit faster and was able to be prepared, but it is something that you should kind of be aware of. So fieldwork is not automatically funded. And I know there's this whole myth that, when you get into PhD programs, they're fully funded. I've already talked about that in past videos. But when you are thinking about fieldwork, oftentimes we take that for granted, that our department or that our university will help us do our field research. Specifically, or especially if you are in a humanities or social science space and you may need to travel somewhere or live somewhere for a long period of time, fieldwork can really end up being expensive. And depending on what your research is, it can even be more expensive than staying at your university. So, something to keep in mind is as you are preparing for your graduate school, you need to think about, as part of your research proposal, where you need to go for your fieldwork and what you need to do, and try to get an idea of how long you need to be there. And if possible, if you're somebody who doesn't have funding, like I was, or if you're somebody who just likes to have a fallback plan, like I do, then it's important to kind of think of a range. What is the least amount of time you can spend in your field area, and what is the most amount of time you would like to spend in your field area? So that way you have kind of a range of a budget that you can aim towards as you prepare to go to field work. The third thing is something that I just don't feel like most people talk about, and it is don't believe the hype. Now, before you're like, what in the world does that mean? Let me break it down. So when I was in my master's program, I was coming straight out of my undergrad. I didn't know anything about grad school. I didn't know anything about research. I didn't know anything about much of anything, really. And I really internalized that as me needing to prove that I belong there. And I have this whole video talking about imposter syndrome, but I really want to talk about this a little bit more in depth, because it wasn't just I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I belonged, but I felt like I needed to demonstrate to everybody around me that I belonged. And that is fundamentally just not the healthiest thing to do. Additionally, part of the hype of grad school is accepting or internalizing or believing that if you are not struggling or suffering, then you are not doing grad school right. And that is also not true. I have noticed throughout my own department, there are a lot of grad students who are like, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, this is so hard. Oh, this is tough. And grad school is tough. But my first year, I really enjoyed grad school. I was in classes that excited me. I was working on things that were new and, really fun to me. And I had jobs that were directly related to my research. So I was feeling very inspired and empowered and just positive. And if I didn't have such a positive first year, I don't think I would have had this kind of awareness of what the hype is. But again, building off of my experience as a master's student, and then noticing that there were still people in my PhD program who felt like they needed to prove themselves, who felt like they had to suffer or torture themselves to be considered hardworking or worthy graduate students, it really brought to my attention that this is a mental thing that is developed in academia that can be really overwhelming for a lot of graduate students. So don't believe the hype. It is okay to have fun. It is okay to not be stressed. If you are getting your work done, that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. If you are understanding the material, it doesn't mean that you're missing something important. Grad school doesn't have to be this mental game where you have to find where's the hard part or where's the struggle or where should you suffer, but instead you should just do what you came there to do, which is learn about the things you care about and develop your final project, be it your master's thesis, a capstone project, or your dissertation. Grad school shouldn't be a horrible process. You should love your grad school experience as much as you can, right? And so for me, don't believe the hype is really about really focusing on what matters to you and not internalizing other people's insecurities, not internalizing other people's expectations, and not internalizing other people's doubts or stresses, because that's what you hear over and over again. It is really easy if everybody around you is like, oh, that reading was so hard, I didn't understand it, how could I understand it? How could anybody pass this class? And then you start to believe, oh, maybe I didn't understand that reading, or maybe it was harder, or maybe the way I write is elementary or isn't good enough and I should go and make it more complex. Like, don't believe the hype. Try your hardest, work as hard as you can, learn about your field, and if you are succeeding, accept the fact that you're succeeding. Don't make grad school harder than what it has to be. Also, you don't owe anybody anything. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You made it into grad school, so that means you're good enough. So just do what you came there to do. Learn your stuff, graduate. Learn, graduate. That should be your only focus. Everything else is kind of external, and it shouldn't be your main priority, especially if it's going to impact your mental health or your emotional stability. The fourth thing I wish I would have known before going to grad school is just what is the purpose of professional organizations? Now, a lot of you may not even know what a professional organization is, and that is totally fine and totally normal. Professional organizations are usually associations or organizations that are related to a specific field or a topic. And this is significant, or at least it was significant to me, because I thought it was a way to demonstrate that I care about a field or that I'm in the field. So you would pay for membership. Students usually get a very low discounted amount. Sometimes it's even free for students. And then they often put on conferences. And so you would go to these organizations' conferences, be it the National Association of Anthropologists, I don't know if that's one, but something like that. Something that is focused on your niche or on your field or your discipline, and they have conferences and you can go to their conferences. But they actually do so much more. And this is what I wish I would have known beforehand, because man, would I have taken advantage of these things. First, join their listservs. And their listservs can talk about their conferences, of course, but they also talk about Funding, which again is going to be a thing I talk about for the rest of my life because it really did just mess me over a little bit. But oftentimes these associations have very specific funding opportunities for their members, for their students, and they have awards and honors that are available to their students and their members, and that is always something good to go on your CV. Also, going to these conferences, presenting at these conferences, joining a panel about these conferences will also help you as a young scholar have people learn who you are, get public speaking skills, but also get feedback on your research and just network a little bit. Another thing that these listservs can do, and I think this was really cool, but they also just send out random or general opportunities more broadly. So this could be calls for postdocs or jobs. It can also be something a little bit more fun, like podcasts or YouTube channels that are relevant to your focus, or cool things going on in the field more broadly. And there also could be calls for their journals. So if you're a young scholar and you're really looking to publish, or you want an opportunity to see what is the submission process looking like, you can see what calls are being made for their journals, or what book reviews are they requesting to be done, and then you can respond and say, hey, I'll do this book review for you. So joining these organizations and being active in them, and also joining their listservs, are a great way to set up a strong foundation to professionalization, which is a big part of PhDs. And I know a lot of people are adverse to academia because everybody doesn't want to be a professor, or professorships are hard to get. But by doing these things, by getting published early, even if it's book reviews, by going to conferences and networking and having people know you, by doing these things and being active in these organizations, it makes your ability to get hired a lot stronger. And so in that way, professional organizations are a great tool and mechanism to help ease you into professional life. And not to mention, you will also probably find other people within your organization that are doing other things than just being professors. And that can also help you broaden your horizon when you're thinking about what do you want to be when you grow up. And y'all, the fifth thing that I wish I would have known before going to grad school is that you and your advisor do not have to agree. And this is important because I see, especially like within my own program, because it's so interdisciplinary, a lot of graduate students really want guidance from their advisor. And that's totally valid, and that is what they are supposed to do. But sometimes your advisors can only know so much about your research project because you yourself are still developing what your research project is. So when you are having conversations with your advisor, take your conversations or their advice as suggestions and not things that you have to do. And that will fundamentally change how you view your project, but also the progress that you make throughout your degree. One of the things that I've noticed a lot is that when you depend too much on what your advisor says, is that it can derail you or slow down your process of getting to the research project that you care most about. And thinking specifically about my own journey, when I came into the program, I had a very specific idea of what I wanted to do, why I wanted to do it, and how I was going to do it. But then when I brought it up to my advisor, he didn't really quite understand what I was saying or what I was about. And so he suggested something completely different and directly related to my master's, but completely different than what I wanted to do for my PhD. Now, if I would have completely scrapped what I was gonna do and just went with his words, yeah, I probably would have ended up with a pretty strong dissertation topic. I'm not gonna say your advisor is gonna lead you anywhere wrong where it's not gonna be good. But I probably wouldn't have been as excited about that project as the project that I ultimately ended up with. And so when I talk to my advisor, it's in guidance to see what are the things that they are thinking about, what is it that they care most about, and what are the things that are important to the field. And then I take that information and think, okay, how can I apply it to the things that I care most about? Or if you're somebody who's trying to figure out what is a feasible project for them in this time with these resources, you can apply, okay, well maybe I can't do 4 years doing ethnographic research in a village in some outskirt town because I just don't have the funding or the ability or the connections to do that. But perhaps I can do an evaluation of those migration patterns of those community members in Detroit. And so it's just being aware of where you can compromise and where you don't have to compromise, but it never is an all or nothing deal. And so I think at first I felt really kind of frustrated or even a little self-conscious because I was confused. I didn't understand why my advisor didn't like my project or wanted me to do something completely different. But as I've gotten further into this process, I realized it's not that he hated what I was doing, he just didn't understand what I was doing. And I didn't have the vocabulary or the experience to be able to demonstrate its significance or even the logistics of my research project. And so for my advisor, he was probably hearing a bunch of mumble jumbled ideas that didn't make sense, and he was trying to guide me into something that was more structured or was more feasible or logistically possible within this time frame, so I could succeed as a graduate student, rather than him saying, I hate your project. And so that is something else to consider. Just being hyper aware that you and your advisor don't have to agree every time, that their suggestions are just that, suggestions, and that your project will come to be. And as long as the relationship is good and not toxic, then eventually your professor will better understand what you're trying to do, why it's important, and how you're going to do it based off of your communication and based off of the information, the vocabulary, and the knowledge that you are going to develop throughout your graduate process. But I mean, let's be honest, there are so many things that I wish I would have known before going to grad school, like the differences between grad and undergrad, or that grad school, PhDs specifically, are not always fully funded. But of course, you can't know everything. Though, if you'd like to try, subscribe to this channel to hear more grad advice, more grad life, and everything about research. And if you found at least 2 things in this video useful, don't forget to put a thumbs up. And of course, if you have any questions, don't forget to comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.